Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. I'm Illeagle 86, one of your three hosts, joined as always by my good friends Techtic and Nerdbomber for the first time in the month of November. So Halloween's over. All Hallows Eve, as we talked about last week, come and gone. We're into Thanksgiving season. If that's your proclivity, some people probably already have turkeys cooking as they're listening to this. Do you think you could cook a turkey for a whole month? And do you think it would be good?
I think it would get dry if you cooked it for the whole month.
I could eat turkey.
What if you cooked it
for most of the month and be fine? I love a turkey.
Could you just like low and slow for like the whole month, but like really low? Like, could you like put a turkey in an oven that's at like 175 degrees, like barely even hot, and just for 28 days, put it in an oven?
I feel like you'd end up
cooked at the end.
You'd start off with no bacteria, and then over time, the bacteria would evolve. You'd create a new strain. What you would do is you would end the world and destroy humanity. You would develop a new strain of bacteria, release it into the world, and kill everyone. This is because you wanted to cook a turkey for 30 days.
I'm not thinking about trying it. I was just making conversation. So there's nothing to worry about. I think if I was ever to cook a turkey, which, by the way, never cooked a turkey. I'm a very lucky person. I typically go elsewhere for Thanksgiving. I have family members who cook turkeys. I've heard really good things about the deep fried turkeys. I've heard
that you can start your house on fire.
Yeah, videos of like entire houses starting.
Yeah, but you could start your house on fire like so many ways. Just
in any way, yeah. I think that's probably what I would try to do if I was to make a turkey. Because also, like, deep frying it probably doesn't take as long. Like, cooking a turkey in the oven, it takes like 4 hours, right? Like at minimum, I think is kind of the gist of it.
Turkey overnight.
That'd be good. Keep me updated if you do try doing that. Thanksgiving is like 4 weeks away, by the way. I'm treating this like it's the Thanksgiving episode, but it's not. November is kind of the Thanksgiving month. But, however, I would say that it's because of the schedule this year. I was talking to my wife about this recently. Like, Thanksgiving is on like the 28th this year or something, 28th or 29th. So yeah, like
it's super late.
When Thanksgiving is over, it's like you have like 3 weeks to celebrate Christmas or like anticipate Christmas. And in my humble opinion, as someone who was raised as like you don't celebrate Christmas till after Thanksgiving, like that was how I was raised, like that's not enough time. So, I'm not necessarily saying like start drinking eggnog right now, but
do it.
I think over the next few weeks, like I would expect diehard not until after Thanksgiving people to exercise a little bit of grace this year just because of the shifted schedule. Like, just be kind to the people who want to like put their tree up before Thanksgiving if they so choose. That's just an unsolicited PSA. I don't have a tree up yet, but of the 2 trees that we have in our house, I guarantee you one's going to be up before Thanksgiving. I'll go on record and say that right now. So, I got a lot of Christmas movie watching and Christmas book reading to do, and I need to do that in the presence of a tree. And I can't do it all in 3 weeks. So, sue me, I guess. It's November. It's, there's a few weeks to go until Thanksgiving. You get the gist. We have to talk about Star Wars today. We have to talk about Sony today. We have to talk about Nintendo today. 3 classic big companies just duking it out on the Online Warriors podcast. A tale as old as time. Another classic episode in store for you all. So let's just dive right in. I want to start with Star Wars Skeleton Crew because we got an official trailer for this last week. This show is coming out on December 3rd of this year. I think the trailer we got for this before that we talked about was significantly less detailed than what we got here, obviously. This is the official trailer. We probably got a teaser before. I also may be just totally misremembering that we talked about this on the show. I feel like we did, but maybe we didn't. If we didn't, whatever, we're going to talk about it now. I'm going to turn it over to you guys to give some thoughts. I really have 2 main thoughts that I want to share. One is that I think when the first trailer dropped, I basically referred to this as Star Wars Goonies, and like that's clearly what this is.
Star Wars.
Nothing about this.
Yeah,
I think Star Wars Goonies. I have to disagree about Stranger Things. I think this is Star Wars Goonies. They're on a treasure hunt. They're fighting pirates. Like it's very Goonies coded to me. But also, I'm gonna lay a prediction out there. Jude Law's gonna wind up being a bad guy. That's my spicy take. I think he's going to show up to save these kids initially, and he's going to turn out to be bad, helping the pirates in some way.
I think what's going to end up happening is he's going to come off like a good guy to start, end up having bad motivations, but then he ends up having formed a bond with all of these kids. So then he turns into a good guy at the end. Like he has a change of heart. I think he's going to go through that character
I agree with Nerdbomber. He's going to have skeletons in the closet, but he's going to be a good guy. But he's dying. He dies. Guaranteed.
You think he dies? I could see that happening too. So what you're referring to, by the way, is the Han Solo arc of like, he seems like a good guy. Oh, he's not that great a guy. Actually, he's a good guy. Like that's the arc from A New Hope. It's like he goes to leave and then he comes back and saves everybody, which is a pretty classic Star Wars arc. So I'm not opposed to that. I think he's going to wind up going full bad and get his comeuppance. So I don't know. I think this will be fine. Like I'm torn because like I do very much want new Star Wars properties that do new things that don't involve Jedi. Like that's a particularly important criteria for me. This is made by John Watts and Chris Ford. Like there's a lot of people involved in this that like it could be really, really good. I think it's John Watts, I believe, did Spider-Man Far From Home, if I recall correctly. And Nick Frost is in this, Kerry Condon. Like there's a lot of, besides Jude Law, like, good people in this. It has all the ingredients that should make it good. I'm just not that excited about it. But like, I kind of feel bad about not being excited about it.
I think you not being excited about it is correct. I think what this is doing is the Star Wars franchise as a whole, I find can be intimidating for a younger person trying to get into it. And what this does is it gives you a relatable cast and crew for younger people to now get into Star Wars and then ultimately grow up with it. This doesn't have to be for you, and that's fine. This is for them, and I'm excited for that.
But I also think they saw the success of things like the first season of Goosebumps, which there's a second season coming of that because it actually ended up doing well. And it had, your plucky cast of teenage kids. And I know this cast is a little bit younger, I think, but the formula of having like a plucky cast of kids with then one or two adult chaperones in their adventures has been playing pretty well. You look at something like Stranger Things, you look at Goosebumps. I feel like there's other shows out there. I just don't have them on the top of my mind right now. But I feel like that formula has been working. And I think right now they're grasping at straws to try to find something that's working in the entire like Disney Plus portfolio. And they're going to try this now. And I think it probably will work. Like, I think the tone and also moving away, like you said, this doesn't involve Jedis, which is refreshing because I feel like they get shoehorned into almost everything. And jury's still out. Maybe they will be shoehorned into this series as well. But like at what we see in this trailer, they're not. So maybe they're trying to do something that will appeal and kind of buy them some goodwill back.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I was going to say, like, we think there aren't Jedi in it. Like, this is kind of how The Mandalorian started, right? It's like, no Jedi in, like, an episode, and it's like, actually Jedi. Like, that, I'm kind of trying to prepare myself emotionally for that bummer. I agree with everything you said. Like, I think Stranger Things in particular was a huge touch point for shows like this. And like you said, I'm sure there are other examples that we're not thinking of, but like, it is a bankable format with the success of Goosebumps. I have to disagree with you, Techtic. Like I understand. I think you're right about what, Dave Filoni and Kathleen Kennedy, like what they're trying to do with this show and like get younger audiences in. I just find that to be a very interesting point, considering that like I was watching A New Hope on VHS when I was like 6 years old. Like I don't know that as a kid, I don't know that I was unique in watching those movies and being really into them and not caring that like every character was in their 30s or 40s, right? Like that just didn't really matter to me.
But I feel like, and this is probably a strange take, but I feel like kids these days are more kiddie, if that makes sense.
Kids these days? We just had that might be our first Kids These Days on the entire show.
Like and in the same sense that I feel like adults these days are more kid-like.
I would argue no. Like, I feel like, and maybe Gen Alpha and younger can pipe up in the comments or Twitter or what have you. But I feel like because kids are so connected, I almost think they're a little bit older than what we're used to.
Yeah, kids are forced to grow up very fast, I think. But like, I definitely understand your point. And like, I can imagine kids, even back when I was a kid, but especially now, like kind of craving that level of representation in the media they consume. I guess I would kind of argue that they can already get that from a lot of other things. I don't know that Star Wars needs to provide that, but, this will work. I do agree with, I think both of you said that at some point when you were giving your comments, like, this is going to work. I don't know, these shows are always kind of strange where like, is the intent for this show to have a second season? I would imagine probably the answer is yes, but it's also like it's a show and you watch the trailer for it and it kind of feels like it should be a movie. And I think Marvel properties have done this, Star Wars properties have done this that are going straight to Disney Plus. It's like they're kind of going to tell a self-contained story and see how well it goes over a few episodes. And if that goes well, then they will make a few more. And it just happens that those are then seasons of a show. That's a very interesting approach. It does seem to work for them, which is I'm sure why they're doing it. But like, I would expect this to essentially play like a movie. And then, you know, I think the trailer is good. I found it very funny that like, the beginning of this trailer is like those two kids like in the principal's office or whatever, and like the one kid's like, what did you do? And you see this girl like doing, I don't know, like certainly doing ne'er-do-well stuff, and then she's like, what did you do? And he just kind of like fell down into a ditch and found a door, and apparently that got him in trouble. I want more answers on that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this could be really good. I think it's going to be successful. I just don't know that it's, as I think people who listen to this show have figured out by this point, like it's kind of hard to get me on to Disney Plus to watch things. And this certainly isn't going to be what does that for me, unless I hear like really, really positive word of mouth stuff about it. But I can certainly understand what they're trying to do. So like, I'm definitely in favor of it. I'm also like, regardless of whether he's good or evil or whether he dies or not, like I'm unapologetically a Jude Law fan. I think he's fantastic in kind of everything he does. I don't know that I've watched a bad Jude Law movie. So chime off in the comments with the worst Jude Law movie you've ever seen. I even watched Repo Man, and that movie's kind of bad, but like it was entertaining and he was in it. So like, I don't know. If I watch it, it might wind up being because of him. But it's also interesting that like I'm on the Wikipedia page for this show, and it says John Watts approached Lucasfilm about telling an Amblin Entertainment style coming of age story. Amblin Entertainment style is such a funny adjective to me. Basically, like, remember when Steven Spielberg made like E.T.? Like, we just kind of want to do that. So like that is also, again, clearly I think Amblin actually did the Goonies too. So like that's clearly what the inspiration is. I feel like those kinds of movies are also really associated with the 80s, which is when Star Wars was a big deal. Mm-hmm. So, and Stranger Things obviously also associated with the 80s. So like, are we just in the 80s now is, a question.
Hey, everything old becomes new again.
I'm not against it.
Wow.
Like I said, I'm not against it. I don't know for sure that I'll watch it. Ironically, this is something that I would probably be more likely to watch if it was at a theater than on Disney Plus, which I know makes absolutely no sense, but I am what I am. So again, December 3rd, this comes out. Be on the lookout for that. If you are a fan of Star Wars, if you're a fan of children getting into mischief and maybe finding treasure and fighting pirates and Jude Law being there. So again, December 3rd, Disney Plus. Nintendo. We're back to Nintendo. And this is another one that, so we talked a few weeks ago, Nerdbomber, you were absent, but I know you listen to the show because you listen to every episode and you love us so much. You love hearing the sound of your own voice. Although your voice was not on this episode. It was
this was Boys Night.
It's always actually
the Nintendo Alarmo.
I don't know if you
episode.
guys like do this, but when you're not on the episode, it's always interesting to listen to the episode back because like you don't know what's going to happen, and I love to see which ways you guys are going to like zig and zag.
Yeah, I've never been able to do that. I've only missed one episode in the entire 30 seasons.
Iron Man, like what do you want from us? Hey, next time the dog is sick, I'll chat with our good friend Illeagle. It'll be great.
30 seasons. I like that descriptor. I don't know that we've done. I don't know what season we're on. I don't keep track of that, but I don't think it's been 30.
We're on 32.
Yeah, we're on 32.
Bitch.
We are apparently on season. We're apparently on season 32. Good for us.
It's not to go down a little bit of a tangent, but at this point, so at one point our episode numbering system made sense because we used to do 10 episodes every 6 months and take a little bit of a break. And since that quickly changed, I think after like the first break, we decided to just do it in perpetuity weekly. And so now the seasons don't really make sense.
But every 10 episodes is a new season.
Every 10 episodes, we just roll it over. So we've done 320 plus episodes of this show.
Yeah.
Which that number that tracks. That makes a little bit more sense to me. Anyways, we talked about Alarmo on the show. I think we had a good conversation, Techtic and I did, about Nintendo kind of, finding new and creative ways to expand its brand into people's homes and into other devices besides actual video gaming devices. I think we were both fairly bullish on the Alarmo. I don't really know how it's doing at this point. I don't even know if it's formally come out yet. It might still be in pre-order. But Nintendo is kind of doing more stuff like that with Nintendo Music, which like I think that when you hear Nintendo Music, don't get me wrong, it's a concept that makes sense, and we're going to get into it, and I actually think it's probably pretty great, but it sounds ridiculous. The terminology sounds ridiculous.
I think so. I'm glad you brought up Nintendo Alarmo, because I think this is something that they had created for the Alarmo, and they said, hey, we've already done this lift to gather all of this music in this one spot for the Alarmo. Should we just roll this off into its own app? I'll bet you that's how this became created.
I think that's very possible. I don't know for sure none of us know for sure. I would think that that's what happened, but I think that's certainly plausible. I think that, so getting into the meat of this, like we got a trailer for this last week, 2.5 minutes of basically describing what this is. In a lot of ways, what it is fairly self-explanatory. It's an app that you get, you can put it on your smart device, listen wherever you get apps, basically, that allows you to listen to music from Nintendo video games. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more features to it than that. But at face value, you have to know that, like, as a scorehead, notably, I talk about this all the time on this show, like, I am a fan of this. I don't know that I will. You need to have Nintendo Switch Online to get access to this app. I currently don't. I don't really have plans to have it, so I probably won't ever get it. But I really appreciate the concept as a fan of video game music, which I think I've mentioned this before on the show too. And we may have talked about this when we had Greg Edmondson on, where like music for video games is a very specific type of music, right? Because it is a lot of the time orchestral or like 8-bit, or it's instrumental, right? There's typically not lyrics, and the music is typically such that it adds ambiance to the situation that you're in, whether it's a boss fight or something more ethereal, but it also is crafted to not pull your focus too much, right? And what that makes it good for, in addition to playing a video game, is like working at the office or like doing the dishes or various other menial tasks that people do all the time, right? So that alone kind of makes this a good idea. And then you add on the fact that like the library of music here is like pretty substantial. I just think it makes a whole lot of sense.
There's a but though. Why would anyone get this when there's Spotify? And that's what I struggled with.
Well, I don't know. Is this music on Spotify and your streaming services?
I can tell you.
Anymore, because I feel like at one point it was, but I feel like they've pulled it probably with this in mind.
It probably depends is the short answer, but speaking specifically to Metroid, which by the way I thought was criminally underrepresented in this trailer, I can tell you for a fact, as someone who has looked for this music many, many times, that it is not on Spotify. I wish it was, and I have looked up this music on YouTube to listen to it. So, and I've looked up like, we're talking like, I look up a YouTube video that's like, here's the entire soundtrack for all of the Metroid Primes, and it's like 4 hours, right? So I go on a journey as I'm working. Incidentally, the Nintendo Music app kind of allows you to do that, in that it allows you to take certain tracks and loop them for like an hour.
That is the best feature.
I don't even know if
brilliant.
It's necessarily looping though. Like because they phrase it as extending, and I almost wonder if they've fleshed out the scores. Because when you're hearing it in game, typically, I mean, you're not hearing a specific score longer than maybe 5-10 minutes before it gets interrupted by something else. And
they're looping all the sound
you
files.
Think?
Yeah,
they're looping. It's designed to be looped. I mean, think about it. If you pull up the title screen to Super Mario 64, which by the way, amazing title screen music on that game, like it just loops until you press start. It loops forever. It's designed to be looped, right? So like, I assume that's what the intent is with a lot of this. And again, I think that's just like really, really brilliant.
But
it's great.
That's the best feature. I agree.
But they're saying you can loop or extend tracks. So the fact that they're calling it out as two separate actions that you can do, and this is in the Nintendo press release, leads me to believe that they do have tracks that will have additional music added if you want to hear more than just what you would hear in game, which I think is really cool.
So you think they made a specific, say, 3-minute version, 6-minute version?
Well, I think probably not for every track. Like some of them, I'm sure, just like you guys said, will loop. But for some of the, key tracks that everybody is going to be looking at, I'm sure there's going to be some Easter eggs, maybe like an additional minute in between portions of the song that they're going to add in.
The way I understood the extending versus looping is you would loop a specific song Or if you're building a playlist, you would set that song to extend for X amount of time, then go to the next song. That's the way I understood it. It was so that it is still looping, but it's like it's not just looping that song in perpetuity.
Yeah, so I don't know. I truly don't know what the distinction is there, but you're getting to the next point. And you know, this trailer made a few different points. I think the playlist thing that they harped on is fairly bog standard, right? Like you can curate your own playlist, obviously, but there's also playlists for certain moods. There's playlists associated with certain parts of games, which, you know, Spotify curates playlists. Like any music app worth its salt curates playlists for you, right? But like in the context of video games, having like these are songs that happen when you start playing a game, or like these are boss battle songs, like it is a cool little, you know, nuance and tweak on that feature. The other, I guess, big feature that is specific to this kind of experience that I thought was cool is the spoiler prevention aspect of this app, which not so much for video games, but again, as a scorehead, I have been spoiled for things. Season 3 of Only Murders in the Building. Shout out to that show for releasing the soundtrack or the score. And I listened to it and I saw one of the track titles and it spoiled the show for me.
You know, that makes sense. I was trying to think, I was like, how the hell is a wordless score going to spoil anything? But it's the title. Duh.
Track titles. Yeah. So I think that's an astute move, like as a broader point. And I think, again, kind of extending back to the conversation we had about Alarmo, like the thing about Nintendo that's so great is like, they are not just throwing crap at the wall or throwing slop at us. Like they are thinking fairly deeply about how to make something like this the best version of itself, right? Like the best that it can be. And like little features like that are what get it to that point. And I just, you know, again, I'm probably never going to experience this app unless I suddenly become a big Nintendo Switch Online person, which I think is unlikely. But I think it's great. I think it's right there with Alarmo as like a particularly innovative take on the industry that Nintendo is in and how they can extend the reach of that industry.
I still don't know, like, I'm still on the fence. Like, I think it's great to finally have a collection of all of this music, but I still can't help but feel like they should have just made albums of this and put them on existing streaming services, because it does feel a little money hungry to be like, hey, you got to download this separate app. I know you're already paying for your streaming services, but you got to download the separate app and continue a membership. You can't even just buy it outright. And that's the only way you can hear like the official game scores. And I don't love that.
Well, I get that, but I think the key here, and you kind of mentioned this, is like, you're not paying anything extra for this. This is supposed to entice people to get Nintendo Switch Online, right? This is supposed to be something that pushes them over the edge. Whether or not it does that, I guess, kind of remains to be seen.
Okay, like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. All right, so you love movie scores, right? And I don't know how you felt about like the Avengers scores, but imagine, or all of the like Pixar, Disney scores and music. Imagine Disney pulls all of those movie soundtracks, because movie soundtracks hit your streaming services like Spotify and Apple, and you can also just buy them outright. Imagine they pull them from every other storefront and then lock it behind a Disney or MCU only app that you have to have either Disney Plus or some membership for. It sucks.
You're making an assumption, which again, I believe the assumption is false, that the official soundtracks for these games currently exist or did exist at one point on Spotify. I don't know that that's true. Well, I know for Metroid Prime specifically that it's not true.
Okay,
for everything
then
else, I don't know.
For
but
anything moving
you're only
forward,
getting
any
knockoffs,
movie moving forward, you're not going to be able to listen to that on Spotify. You have to subscribe now to Disney app.
But again, that is different, because now you're talking about, you're talking about these artists just completely losing their listenership, and they're not going to want that. I think it's just I understand the point you're trying to make, but I think
I tend to agree with Nerdbomber, and I think what the real answer is, what the way they should have did this is the Spotify way, where, like, sure, if you want to have all of your IPs on one specific app, let them use your app, but like you can have pop-up ads, and then also you can have ads like in their like playlist, just like Spotify does. And if you don't want ads, you get Spotify's premium kind of thing. That's the way to do it, in my opinion.
I mean, I hadn't thought about ad tiers or anything like that. I understand the point you're trying to make, Nerdbomber, which is that like this is feeling like it's paywalling a bunch of really cool music. My point is that I couldn't listen to this before, so nothing is being taken away from me. I could certainly go on YouTube and like bootleg it, but that's kind of true of anything, right? So I guess I'm not that upset about it. I think the question of like, is this viable when you have other streaming music like Spotify? Like, I think that's a perfectly fair question. But I don't know that their goal is for it to be viable as a standalone product. I think their goal is for it to be a sweetener for Nintendo Switch Online. And again, will it serve as that in a, particularly, I don't know, big way? Probably not. I guess I don't know. I'll be curious to see, but I also feel like the kind of thing where I never will know how influential it is. Maybe I have rose-colored glasses on here because I just love these scores so much, and I think it's cool to showcase them in this way, but I can certainly understand your opinion as well. So again, this is available right now. The app is on the Apple Store, Google Play, like all that stuff. If you're a Switch Online member, you can go get it. And I don't know. If I had the capability, I probably would get it. If I got into certain moods, I would put this on instead of Spotify, which I certainly wouldn't be getting rid of Spotify and just having this. But oh god, I love video game and movie scores so much. Anyways, we're gonna move now to an ad before we come back to discuss Sony and Firewalk Studios. But before we do any of that, I would be remiss if I did not shout out our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Stephen Keller. Stephen gets this shout out every week, every episode, as a result of his producership on the show. Stephen supports us at the night level on our Patreon, which is the highest of our 3 levels of support. As a result, he gets his producer shout out. He gets weekly input into the game segment, of course, access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and the occasional guest spot on the show, and the chance to play against us in quizzes. Which he has availed himself of many times at this point. There is also a Squire level of support on our Patreon, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and a page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. So you can head over to patreon.com/Online Warriors Podcast. Get the details there. Consider giving back to this show if you like what you're listening to, or if you like spending money on things you don't like, you could also do that, and we wouldn't hold it against you. So again, that's patreon.com/Online Warriors Podcast. Thanks again to Steven. We will be right back to talk about Sony and Firewalk Studios.
Welcome aboard Too Vague Airlines. We're cruising here at 40,000 feet. That might be too many feet, but what do I know? I'm not really an airplane. I'm a podcaster. Actually, I'm a co-podcaster. I'm the co-host of several episodes of the Too Vague podcast. If you haven't heard it, you're missing out. Check out the Too Vague podcast. Any place podcasts do whatever they do.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. For your continued safety, Too Vague Airlines requires that you keep your seatbelt fastened at all times while seated. But while you're seated, you can tune into the Too Vague podcast, TWOVAGUE, on your favorite podcast services, and enjoy the flight.
All right, we are back to talk about Firewalk Studios. So you may have heard us talk about Firewalk Studios what feels like a month ago. It was longer ago than that. I mean, we talked about Concord on this show. I think this is probably the 3rd time we're talking about Concord on this show. So the first time would have been when the trailer came out during maybe Summer Games Week or something like that, or the summer. What's it called? It's not called Summer Games Week.
What am I
thinking of? Summer Games Fest. Thank you. It might have been that during that trailer came out, and we talked about it as, I don't know. I don't remember how we felt about it, to be honest.
I remember thinking it looked generic.
Right. It came out. It bombed pretty badly. So after a couple weeks, Sony took it offline, and they have announced as of last week that they just went ahead and closed the studio. So Firewalk Studios was shut down. There's, I think, a decent amount of conversation to be had here. Firewalk Studios was formed by ex-Bungie developers, so obviously these guys have some track record of success. Concord was in development for a few years, and cost something like $200 million according to sources. So a bit of an investment from Sony as them trying to get into live service games, so that was the notion, I guess. As you kind of mentioned, Nerdbomber, Concord didn't exactly distance itself in any way, or stand out from an existing field of other shooters that were similar. So as a result, it kind of just tanked. So, big investment for something that didn't do well, and Sony just immediately closed the studio down. There's
I think what's
certainly
wild,
a negative implication to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they didn't even really give the game a chance. And I get that it got bombed right out of the gate, but there were a small contingency of people who did like the game. And I think it was a victim of review bombing. And to shutter a game after 2 weeks and then close the studio, I feel like it's super reactionary. And I'm not in a place where I make, big decisions like that in my life. I don't. I mean, I don't think we ever have to look at our stats in this podcast and be like, oh no, we tried to do the trivia and it sucked and it bombed. Now we have to shut down everything. Like, I don't know what it's like to be in that position. However, I just can't help but feel like only giving a game 2 weeks runtime is just wild and insane.
You also do wonder if they rushed it to development and then that meme with Andre where he shoots the guy and he's like, why is this happening? And it's like a self-shot
Eric
thing.
Andre.
I almost feel like it was the leadership that forced it to be released, and then it bombed because it wasn't ready. And then and ready doesn't mean the game wasn't ready. It could just be the marketing team didn't roll it out and hype it up enough. Those kind of things all take part in a successful release of a game.
Well, I mean, what you're talking about there, it does seem like the core issue. I don't know much about the review bombing. I don't know why that would have happened, but to me, the core issue here wasn't really a marketing thing. It was, again, more so the fact that the game just didn't stand out. It wasn't different from existing free-to-play shooters, so no one cared enough to play it. Analysts estimate the game sold around 25,000 copies in its first week, which I have to imagine was pretty bad. I guess I don't know what those numbers look like in context, but I don't know. I think there's certainly some truth to what you're saying, or potential truth to what you're saying, that they forced it out, realized it sucked, and then immediately pushed the blame onto someone else, or rather pushed the consequences onto someone else. That's that's showbiz, baby, in some respect, but it's dookie.
Well, I think it's just a wild cycle that I think we've kind of gotten into, where these games take years and millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to make, and it feels like they're all trying to chase this live service trend. And let's be real here. How much time does the average player have to spread themselves thin across a bunch of different games? And I think at a certain point, we've kind of hit a peak where there's not much more you can do to innovate in that genre. And I know that some people will disagree with me. I'm sure that's fine. But you have to really stand apart. And I almost feel like maybe we need to start going back to AA style games where we're not sinking hundreds of millions of dollars into something that's very similar and safe to what's already on the market. Maybe we go back to those cheaper, quicker games you look at the indie game scene and they're innovative games that are coming out all the time, winning awards now.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
And they don't, they're often smaller teams, which inherently means a lower cost. And I'm not saying that, we shouldn't have big studios and big developers, but we're constantly seeing these giant projects come out and then they flop. And then the people who are doing the work and not necessarily making the big decisions, but just implementing the decisions are facing the consequences. And that kind of sucks.
I think these big studios and big developing companies, I think they're doing basically what you see kind of in Silicon Valley, where they buy up all these small little indie developers or whatever, take the IP, churn it out, see if it makes money, and then cut bait as soon as. And I think that's their strategy. I think it's try to profit quick and then kill the people, take the games. Kill the people, take the games. I think that's what we're seeing. We're just seeing it at a slower pace now, and I guarantee you this kind of behavior is going to only increase.
So I agree with the take on indie games, and I've talked about Balatro a few weeks ago. I've talked about Inscription and all these games that Nerdbomber suggested. I talk about Dicey Dungeons. My favorite games these days are more often than not games that did not take years and hundreds of millions of dollars to produce. There are exceptions to that, of course, but I think that's the more exciting space because more different things can happen, right? I will add not so much a counterpoint, but an additional idea for, companies like Sony to potentially take on, which maybe you guys will disagree with this. It's maybe a bit of a hot take, but what was great back in so thinking about AA games, that used to be successful back in the 90s and the 2000s, right? That was to some extent a golden era of that kind of game. It was also a golden era of movie tie-in games. Bear with me for a second. I think a lot of the churn that, studios like Firewalk are going through even in a free-to-play game that's multiplayer only, like, they have to build every single thing from the ground up. That costs money. That takes time. If you look at games from like the 90s that were like, or like the 2000s based on like the Lord of the Rings, like they were great games with solid mechanics. They weren't doing anything particularly revolutionary like an indie game would. Like the Lord of the Rings games were just like sword fighting games kind of doing their thing, but they were Lord of the Rings games, so they were sweet. Like, I think there's, I rarely do I say we should, like, I rarely say on this show, like, we should just take existing IP from places and leverage it. But, like, Sony is, like, they make movies. I feel like there's a place for this of, like, make a game that's based on a movie you just came out with that costs, like, $40. And, like, if the movie's good, people will play the game. Or vice versa. People might play the game and be like, I want to see this movie. I think that the whole, like, taking multiple years to make a game for $200 million and shuttering the studio, like, it's just, I agree with you, Techtic, that it's going to keep happening, and it's just not sustainable. So whether you pivot to indie games, whether you pivot to, you know, other kind of creative ways to not just kind of like do that sort of long cycle development stuff, like, I think they need to start doing that. They probably won't, but
I'm going to also probably say something to anger people. This is another hot take, but I think partly we as game players are in part to blame.
We've created this.
Yeah.
We want so much.
And
I think I agree.
If you look back, like just the volume of games, I think one of the biggest criticisms that I'm seeing when games come out is like, oh, this is just like such and such game. This doesn't feel original. And I'm guilty of saying the same thing about some games. But if you look back to like 10, 15 years ago, the volume of games that we were getting was much less. So yeah, of course, it wasn't as easy to compare a game against 1,000 other things because there weren't 1,000 other things to compare it to. And now there's just so much coming out. And I think we're also a little bit spoiled. And that's reflective in, you know, what people are choosing to spend their money on. And also, we don't have infinite money, so you can't buy everything. And it's just become this very weird, murky playground.
Well, yeah, and our standards have gone up, right? Like, we talk about triangles on this show all the time, of like, a game needs to have a certain number of triangles in it for people to pay attention to it, and like, triangles cost money and take time. Like, to some extent, this is a function of how advanced we have become in producing video games, where again, like, back in the 90s, like, they would make a Star Fox that was basically like 3 triangles glued together, and people were like, oh my god, I'm just going to buy that and play it, and like, the expectations weren't any higher than that. So yeah, as a base of game players, we maybe need to adjust our expectations. But again, similar to what we were saying about what Sony should do, like, I just don't think that's going to happen. So what happens now is, I think, a pretty interesting question. Probably more news like this and more things like this where like a game comes out, to say nothing of review bombing too, which like review bombing didn't happen 10, 15 years ago. Now it happens fairly regularly for many different, you know, artistically created products for any multitude of reasons, right? So, you know, we are a fickle consumer base in some respect, and we have to kind of, we make our bed and we have to lay in it. So you're definitely right to bring that up, but I still don't have to like it. And, you know, again, Concord is a game that I probably was never going to play. I'm not really active in the free-to-play space at all. So, like, there's no love lost from me on that, but like, it just kind of sucks for these devs who like Techtic said, may have been put under pressure to create something, and when it went south, suddenly their studio was just entirely closed. These are guys that came from Bungie, and like, I guarantee you when Halo was being made, it wasn't like this, right? So, food for thought, I guess. Yes, Sony also closed Neon Koi, which was another studio that they acquired to produce a multiplayer mobile shooter, and that also got canceled. So like, Sony was cutting bait on some stuff. So yeah, it's hard to end this topic on this note, but like, yeah, this probably will keep happening. I agree with what you said, Techtic. It probably will keep happening. But make a movie tie-in game. Make like a Fall Guy game, or Fall Guys game. What was that movie called? The Fall Guy. Make a game about that. I don't even know if that was a Sony property, but like, come on, just like do that, or like make an indie game. Dare to dream. That brings us to What Are You Up To Wednesday. This is the part of the show where we talk about what we've been up to. And I'm going to turn it over to Nerdbomber because ladies first, chivalry's not dead, etc. The floor is yours. Why don't you regale us with tales from your week?
All right. So first and foremost, I bought Dragon Age, the VeilGuard. I'm not super far into it, but I've probably put like maybe 5 or 6 hours. I mean, it just came out. We're recording this on the 3rd. It came out on Halloween. I was busy on Halloween, so I didn't get to play as much as I wanted to. But so far, honestly, I'm enjoying it quite a lot. What I've played of it so far is not very open worldy. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the God of War setup, where you're given missions in areas that are slightly open. Like you can explore, you obviously want to check like nooks and crannies for things to pick up, but it's not like open world. You know, you're kind of bounded in the areas that you're playing. There is both pause menu abilities, like there's a pause wheel, so if you want to use like your rage power, magical power, what have you, you can do that either paused or you can do it in real time with like a quick shortcut, and your companions that you have with you as well also have, you know, those quick shortcuts to use throughout battle. I play as a warrior. I'm always like in the thick of it, but you can play as more of a, you know, mage character or like a ranged sort of dagger dude. I don't do those. I like to be in the thick of it with a big sword and a shield. So that is what I'm playing as. And so far, I'm finding it a lot of fun. I will say the character creator probably took me like a solid hour and a half. That happens with every RPG. Like, it just takes me so long to make my character and perfect it. And I still feel like I want to go back in and tweak it a little bit. But Techtic told me that it looks a lot like my Disney Dreamlight Valley character. So I think I'm at least like nailing the same, you know, facial format over and over again, which is pretty exciting. And you know, I got to give props a little bit to whoever worked on the hair in this game, because it is very dynamic.
It's so dynamic.
So flowy. It looks so luscious. I've never seen hair like this in a video game. My hair is constantly whipping back and forth. I was actually getting a little bit distracted by how much my hair was moving as I was running around in the game. So like now I have a helmet on my character, which has made, you know, in-game battles a little less distracting, but my hair looks fantastic. If I could have that hair in real life, I 100% would. So like I said, though, I'm still very early on in the game, have a lot more to sink my teeth into, but I'm enjoying it so far. I have never really been a big Dragon Age person. I was a huge Mass Effect fan. Something about Dragon Age, I get really steeped in inventory, and the text was really small. There was just a lot more going on. I felt like in the RPG management system in Dragon Age Origins, which I played Origins and 2 for a little bit and never finished them for the same reason. And this feels a little bit more accessible to me, which I'm sure if you're like a Dragon Age dieharder and that's what you like came to love, that might be a bit of a departure. But I'm finding it way more accessible, and I'm enjoying it and getting into the Dragon Age lore. So I'm probably the target audience here, and I'm having a good time. Other than that, we started Loot Season 2 because now we're back on Apple TV to watch the new season of Shrinking, and did not realize that Loot Season 2 came out, which probably says a lot to Apple TV's marketing plan, that we had no idea that there's like a handful of shows that we had watched seasons of that got new seasons sometime in the last like 3 months, and I had no idea. So we're going to start working through that. I thought that show was super funny. It's got Maya Rudolph. Basically, she is playing a character. It's supposed to be like a mirror of Jeff Bezos and his wife, and when they split, like she started giving her money away. That's basically the character that Maya Rudolph is playing, except like she's very out of touch with reality and like the common person. It's a funny show. So we're getting back into season 2, and we'll let you know how that goes as we get into it.
Right on. I'm going to sandwich myself in between the two of you, and I'm sorry if that makes you feel uncomfortable. I want to give a few non-game updates, because I feel like I've been giving a lot of video game updates in the past couple of weeks, and there's a couple of things that I've been enjoying in the meantime that I haven't had time to bring up. So the first is a book I'm reading called Annihilation. And if
Jeff
you're thinking,
Vandermeer?
hey, there's a movie called Annihilation. Jeff Vandermeer, that's right. This is the first book of the Southern Reach trilogy. Now, I did watch the movie, the Alex Garland movie, which came out at this point probably 6 or 7 years ago. I watched it. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but from what I do remember, I can tell you that the book, or the first book at least, lays out somewhat different and is very uniquely written. It's a very analytical book in a different way than like something like The Martian or Project Hail Mary, like the Andy Weir books. Like, it's not like that. It's not doing calculations, but it's very introspective. There's not a lot of dialogue. Every character is a scientist or, you know, some sort of intellectual person. So there's just a lot of heady stuff happening. there's a lot that when the book starts, you're kind of thrown right into the situation and you don't know a lot, and a lot of context and past events that are important to giving you understanding of characters' actions and interactions. They're kind of doled out as you go through the book. The book is quite short, so I think I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through it. From what I remember, I think there's more that's in the movie than is in this book, so I'm guessing that the movie touched on other books in the trilogy as well. I probably will continue reading it. I don't know that I'm going to read the second one right away, but I am enjoying it. So shout out to that book, which, yeah, by the way, not like new. It's been out for a long time. Obviously, the movie came out a long time ago, so I'm getting to the party late, but I am enjoying it. The other thing I want to shout out, it's a classic, just a TV that we're watching right now. Great British Baking Show is back. And you want to talk about cozy fall vibes? That show is just undefeated. Always feel good vibes, always cozy, never disappoints, always meets expectations and gives you what you expect on any given week. So just want to shout that show out as just being really great. And I also got blue light glasses. That's just a personal update, not necessarily something that I did, but I will say about 4 days into having them, I recommend them. If only because you can get basically any kind of frame that you want from Amazon for like $10. So it's a minimal investment, and like I think glasses are kind of like as a contacts wearer who like wears glasses at night, like I think glasses are a great accessory, and being able to take glasses off while you're thinking and fidget with them is elite.
Oh, do you like put like the frame in your mouth, kind of sexy like?
A little bit, yeah. I'm toying with that. So shout out to blue light glasses. Techtic, that leaves us with you to wrap us up here.
Okay, so I don't have much to update, kind of the usual that I've been up to, but we did finish watching Love is Blind. Great season wrap up, and they gave us a look on the next season. It's going to be in Minnesota, which I don't know what happens in Minnesota, so that's a thing.
Well, I think that'll be interesting because even they had a couple cast members from that season, and they said dating in that area is a lot different because it's a smaller city, so you run into people. They did not.
So get hyped for that. And the other thing is I've just been kind of doing some fall cleaning. Like nothing really been going on. Just I think fall cleaning is much better than spring cleaning because you get to actually enjoy the fruits of your labor because you're spending all of the next couple of months inside. So like clean inside because you're about to be stuck in here. So get hyped for that.
I recently, quote unquote, winterized our house. I did that over this past weekend because it is starting to in our neck of the wood, it's getting a little colder. There's frost on the grass in the morning. So I had to get the grill into the garage and get all the outdoor furniture into the garage and all that stuff. There was a pleasing element to that. I cleaned out the garage in the process, which, was a little bit chicken soup for the soul situation. I felt good after. So I definitely agree with you. I haven't done a whole lot of cleaning inside. I probably should, but that's, I guess, for next weekend, potentially. That brings us to Quiztown. And I'm the mayor of Quiztown this week, so shout out to me, I guess. I am the top dog in Quiztown at 13-8. Nerdbomber 13-9. Techtic 8-18. Whoop. And Steven 2-1. Techtic, I think at this point, again, I still have not actually done the math, but I do think at this point you're playing for pride and little else. So I guess just bear that in mind. There's probably 6 or 7 recording weeks left in the year, taking holidays into account. So I think you're pretty much out of time, considering that if you win, you have to host. So anyways, just have fun with it. The topic this week is M. Night Shyamalan, and I was happy to be doing this quiz because I'm a big fan of his. I think I would have done well in this quiz because I think I'm enough of a fan where I think I would have known or had a good guess at the answer to some of these questions. But I enjoyed putting the quiz together. So this is a classic Price is Right style. Every answer is numerical, and each player gets a +1 or an answer of 1 once per game. Nerdbomber will, of course, go first because she has the better record, and that provides Techtic with a slight advantage. So, starter question, a classic starter question when the quiz is focused on a person. How old is M. Night Shyamalan?
I mean, his daughter was the singer in Trap, and I think she was supposed to be youngish.
I find it very amusing that this is your line of thought. I'm not saying it's wrong necessarily, it's just funny to me.
I'm going to give him 52.
Nice, 60.
Should have used the +1 Techtic. He is 54. So Nerdbomber, very, very close. 54 years old. So
I almost said
Nerdbomber
55.
on the
That
board.
would have been bad.
How many movies has he been involved in as either a director, writer, or producer, according to a little website known as wikipedia.com?
33.
A director, writer, or a producer? I feel like this is lower. 15.
She's on a roll at this point. 21. Most notably, I want to bring up that apparently he is credited as a writer. I think just a script doctor, but still credited as a writer on the movie Stuart Little. Remember that movie?
Really?
not really an M. Night Shyamalan movie, but
although that movie is actually horrific. Because fun fact, Stuart Little is a human. Just looks mouse-like. Just looks mouse-like. So that's kind of makes Stuart Little a bit more horrific, doesn't it? Techtic,
you're on the ropes here early. So I don't know, just try and buck up and see what you can do here. Also, according to Wikipedia, what is the cumulative worldwide gross of his films? So again, the 21 I just mentioned. Cumulative worldwide gross of his films.
800 million.
Oh, this is a cool Billy.
How about a cool 3.3 Billy? I mean, 21 movies, some of them were huge hits. Also, some of them were like Stuart Little, which was probably at least a modest hit.
Yeah,
it was a different kind of Hollywood,
a horror film.
But still. So 3.3 billion, and actually Wikipedia says over 3.3 billion. It's one of those things. So good for you, M. Night. Techtic's on the board. He's still alive. Going into question 4. The Sixth Sense is widely considered to be his breakthrough film and his most popular. How many senses are there in the... I'm just kidding. What is the runtime of the movie in minutes?
130 minutes.
So that puts it at over a 2-hour movie. 131 minutes. Or however, what was his? You said 130? 131.
Yeah, it was 130. Guys, it used to not be a requirement that movies be 2 hours or longer. It is now, but back then you could make a movie that was 108 minutes and it would be a huge hit. It was 108 minutes. So, Techtic, you're still alive going into the last question. I do have a tiebreaker prepared, so feel free to just, crush this one. If I recall correctly, you still have your +1. So, you're in business here. How many distinct identities does James McAvoy's character have in the movie Split? Did you guys see this movie, first of all?
No.
He has dissociative identity disorder. I don't know if you get the gist from knowing anything about.
Yeah, it's a superhero movie.
Isn't it 3?
It's actually not. It's 4.
Try 23.
I know it's
4. Oh, really?
23. Yeah.
I thought there was one for every movie, so...
Yeah, we should watch.
By the way,
Glass. We should watch the whole suite.
After Trap, I have no interest in M. Night Shyamalan.
Well, I understand that, but I have to agree with Techtic, or I guess suggest the same thing as him. Split is a very underrated movie, and the other 2 movies in the East Rail 177 trilogy, which we'll get to in a second, are also very good. Unbreakable is my personal favorite M. Night movie. Which brings me to the tiebreaker, because you guys both have 2 questions correct. This is going to be a text and answer as usual. The movie Unbreakable, which again is my favorite of M. Night's movies, starts with Bruce Willis being the only survivor on a derailment of a train, East Rail 177, outside of Philadelphia. How many people died in that train derailment? And the hint is everyone on that train died except for him, because he was unbreakable. That's the gist.
This is a text-in?
This is a text-in question. Good luck to you both. You guys both, how often have you guys traveled on trains? Because you guys are both, we're not talking about a train in an amusement park. We're talking about an actual train that people travel on. Techtic guessed 69, and he also wrote nice. And he takes this one home. Nerdbomber guessed 32. The actual answer was 131.
Well, I thought maybe it was an empty train.
It was not an empty train. It was a very busy commuter train.
But I was afraid to bust. And I felt like she was going to bust.
Also, here's an interesting just side fact. First of all, congratulations to Techtic. Techtic moves to 9 and 18 on the year. Nerdbomber to 13 and 10, which puts me in a further comfortable position as I face off against Nerdbomber next week. Fun fact, the last time we had a texting question on this show, so we do all of our communicating through Discord, typically, as a podcast. But occasionally you guys will have to send me a text message to give tiebreaker answers for the quizzes. So let me just read through the last 4 messages that I've gotten from Nerdbomber over text. 6, 5, 32, and 32. So, Nerdbomber, did you see the 32 from the last answer you gave me, which I don't remember the question for, and you were like, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, over to Techtic, he actually was texting me about something, so it's less funny, but I guess it's because he's not in the quizzes as much, or he doesn't get tiebreakers as much. He texted me 8%, and then he said 69, nice, and that was it. Then there was actual conversation before that. So, in any case, congratulations again to Techtic. Techtic will host next week's quiz, in which I will face off against Nerdbomber as we continue to battle for the top spot to the Victor Goes to Spoils. We thank you all for showing up this week to sit down with us, have a chat about, Sony and whatever the other things we talked about were Nintendo music and Star Wars Skeleton Crew. If you liked what you listened to, or if you didn't, you can head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review. You can hit us up on Patreon, patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Consider giving back to the show, or you can hit us up on Twitter. @OW_Illeagle86 is my handle. We have @OW Nerdbomber and @OW Techtic and our main show account @OnlineWarriors1. So again, head over there to have a conversation with us if you so choose. And have a fantastic week. We'll see you guys next week for the next episode. In the meantime, stay safe and keep on podcasting.